This is your friendly neighborhood author, Jonathan, and you are listening to Season 5 of the Floor Rejects podcast, The Isle of Artemisia. Hi, I'm back. It's me. Have you missed me? Probably not. It's your friendly neighborhood author here. I'm back with a new season of the Floor Rejects podcast. Just on the off chance that you're wondering, some things have happened since I went away after season 4. We Just Call It Love, which was the first season of this podcast, has officially come out for sure. No takesies backsies on the Kindle store and in paperback. So if you're looking for it in paperback, you can definitely call your local bookstore and ask, see if they'll put it on the shelves. You can also get it on Amazon because I know some people don't like to wait. So you can get it on Amazon. It's just under We Just Call It Love. You'll see it. It's a brown and blue cover. What else has happened podcast-wise? I've written like 4 chapters so far for this new season. So without waiting a bunch and droning on, let's get into chapter 1, shall we? Chapter 1, Stupid Americans. Barrett Lake was a man who couldn't care less about seeing the world. He wasn't a person who undervalued other cultures, but he had a crippling anxiety that only got worse the farther he got from home. Coming from a little town in Tennessee, walking down through these cobbled streets of Kytheria, a small Greek island, Barrett was on the brink of breaking down. He'd been popping his anxiety medication with such a frequency that his body was constantly drooping from it, from the moment he stepped on a plane in Nashville to this moment, where he found himself walking down a dirt and stone street, listening to the sounds of a small town that couldn't be more foreign or more similar to his own home. He was used to the sounds of mothers calling after their children, of men yelling and being raucous in open-air bars, or the sound of dogs barking and yelping in backyards and windows. But hearing it all in a different language, a strange inflection, he thought even the dogs were barking in a different language. The sounds were beginning to take over his mind, drowning out the sound of his breathing and the feeling of his sandals scraping against rough stone as he struggled to keep up with the pair in front of him. He'd graduated with his bachelor's degree 2 months before, and the day after found himself single, which was a marked change from what he was used to. His long-term boyfriend left him alone in their apartment after he announced he couldn't be with someone so broken as Barrett cowered on their bed, crying and terrified at the prospect of going to a party in honor of his own graduation. When Mark walked out the door, Barrett swore to himself that he would fix what was wrong in his mind. In the following days, he made an appointment with a therapist, began to focus on himself, and called Daniel, his best friend, and one of the 2 people walking down the street in front of him. Daniel, a lanky blonde with piercing green eyes, had set him straight. He'd always been the person Barrett would talk to when he had an issue since they were kids, and after Mark walked out, Daniel had a long, mostly one-sided conversation with his friend, and helped him realize just how tired he was of feeling isolated. Barrett was determined to change his life, and this trip was Daniel's suggestion to get himself out of the 23-year-old rut he'd always been in. Daniel agreed to go with Barrett as a support system as long as he could bring his girlfriend, who was the other person who walked 20 feet in front of Barrett, bouncing down the road under Daniel's thin, sinewy arm. She was a firecracker. Barrett had always liked her. Daniel was going into med school in the fall, and she was going into a master's program for social work. Her short hair was bleach blonde with dark roots, and her eyes were a dark amber color that shone even on the darkest of nights. She'd become one of Barrett's friends as Daniel brought her around more and more frequently. In fact, Barrett had started to text her and hang out one-on-one. He liked her, to the point that he worried about them breaking up because he didn't want to have to choose. But he was sure that that would not happen. They were so in love, so determined to be together no matter what was thrown at them. "Bear, catch up," Crystal calls over her shoulder, her hair spinning around in a glowing halo. Barrett snaps out of his daydream and jogs to catch up with his friends. They'd just left the house they had rented, their second night out of 12 spent drinking late into the night, staring up at the spectral night sky. Barrett was no longer broken-hearted after Mark had left him, but something about the quiet night filled with smoke from a bonfire and laughter from the happy couple had left him feeling depleted this morning. They were currently headed towards the docks, where they had been told by their cab driver that there was a local bar that was sure to impress. When they arrived, sweating in the steaming early sun, they ducked into a cool, dark bar that was sparsely filled with what appeared to be exclusively grizzled old men who sat in small groups talking in low tones. Crystal and Daniel sat at a small table near the window, staring out onto the water as Barrett got them a round of beers. They planned on regrouping after walking up with dry mouths and pounding heads. "Crystal, what exactly is on the agenda for today?" Daniel asks after Barrett sloppily tables 3 mugs of warm beer, the head splashing down over the table. The foam pops quietly as the 3 of them take deep swigs of the pale ale. "Well, I think we ought to go down to the beach, enjoy the water and the sand," she suggests, leaning back and languishing in the idea of the warm water and sand wrapped around her. She smiles, looking out a small window towards the boats bobbing distantly in the water. "Or we could check out the docks. I heard there were some guys out there that you can hire to take you sailing," Daniel says, shooting a look at Crystal. He was a man always intent on filling his days. He wasn't an idle person like Crystal and Barrett are, and Barrett thinks that was one of the reasons he was drawn to Crystal, and why he was drawn to Daniel as well. He liked having the dichotomy of 2 friends who were the same, and yet polar opposites. "Barrett, you can be the tiebreaker," Crystal says, over the lip of her beer, a glint in her eye. She knows he would rather lay on the beach. He mulls it over, his eyes rolling as he considers both paths. One would likely lead to a sunburn and sand in his shorts, and the other would likely lead to a sunburn and possible drowning. He realizes that to get out of his funk, he needs to be more adventurous. "Let's go to the docks. I'd love to be out on the water," Barrett says. Daniel laughs and Crystal slaps the table, making several of the old men around them jump and scowl at her. "Bullshit. Stop sucking up," she says good-naturedly, staring between her boyfriend and his best friend. "I'm not. I just want to see as much as we can. We can always go to the beach tomorrow," Barrett says, and Crystal groans as Daniel holds a hand up for a high five. Barrett smiles, slapping Daniel's hand and taking a long drink of his beer. He wasn't a huge drinker, but he figured, when in Greece. "Chug, guys, we want to get a good boat. Barrett, do you have your guide?" Daniel asks. "Always. I stay prepared," Barrett says, tapping the small bag that hangs at his side. In it he carried a bottle of water, a lighter, his laminated translation guide, his phone, and a tin of sour candy he picked up at the duty-free shop. "Good. Meet me out on the docks when you finish," Daniel says, rushing out of the bar after downing his beer. "You little weasel. I know you wanted to go to the beach," Crystal says, poking at Barrett as he sips his drink. He grins. She was right, but he was also trying to turn over a new leaf post-breakup. He didn't want to be the scared, defenseless, weary man he had been for as long as he could remember. "I do, but I need to get out of my own way, Crystal. You know how badly Daniel wanted to explore. We can just enjoy the sun and hopefully see some dolphins. Let him have this, and we can spend the day on the beach when we get back," Barrett says, softening Crystal as they finish their drinks. When they step back out into the damp heat of the Grecian summer, Barrett spots Daniel on the docks, talking intently to someone who squatted. "Hey, how's it going?" Barrett asks as Daniel walks away from the man dejectedly. "Not well. Everyone says there'll be a storm in the next couple days, and it won't be good weather for us being out on the water. At least, I think that's what they're saying," Daniel says, and Barrett smiles, pulling out his guide. "Here, you're better at talking to people than I am," Barrett admits, and Daniel smiles, turning to find another boat owner to ask, when a shadow falls over him and Crystal from behind. "I can take you," says a gravelly voice. All 3 of them turn to look at a towering man who'd sidled up to their conversation. He was thin, almost gangly, with a mop of black hair. He seemed to be in his early 30s, with deep, sun-weathered skin and a long, regal nose with deep green eyes. "I'm sorry. I hear you talk about sailing. I have a boat. I can take you," he reiterates. "How much?" Daniel asks excitedly. Barrett makes a small, reluctant sound. Something about the man was giving him a creeping feeling at the back of his spine. 300 euros, the man says, his tone indicating no room for negotiation. Crystal hisses to herself. That would take a chunk out of their budget for the trip. She looks to her boyfriend, nervous to lose so much money on one activity, but the American was intent on getting out on the open ocean. "What's your name, friend?" Barrett asks quietly. The man looks down on him seriously. "Nikolaus, but you can call me Nick," he says. He has a heavy accent, but his English seems pretty good. "Nick, we will go out with you. Can we go now?" Daniel can barely contain his enthusiasm. "Not now. Tomorrow. I must get ready. We go for one night, Nick says. What time? Barrett asks. I'll find you. Where are you staying? The Greek asks. Crystal tells him the address and he nods knowingly. Be ready in the morning. Bring food, water, and the money, he says, backing down the dock with a length of rope wrapped around his shoulder. Seriously? Are you guys cool with just getting on some random guy's boat? Crystal questions them as Barrett pockets his guide and Daniel bounces from foot to foot. Babe, it's fine. Now you get your beach day, Daniel reasons, and Crystal stands obstinately for a moment before relenting as he wraps her arms up in a tight embrace. She smiles, sagging against him. Daniel leads them off the docks and down the road towards the public beach. The sand is warm, the granules sliding against their young bodies in the intense midday heat. Barrett quickly drinks his water, and Daniel brings them a styrofoam cooler full of iced beer. They lay out, sweating and laughing in the sun, trying not to stick out as tourists around all the other local families frolicking in the water, laughing and splashing each other. The day wore on as the trio got drunker and drunker in the scorching light. Barrett, are you enjoying yourself? Crystal asks after a long time, rolling over loosely in the sand, squinting at her friend. Yes. I wish I'd done this sooner, he replies, feeling the walls in his mind dissolve in alcohol. Yeah, well, you're here now, bud, Daniel says, groaning and rolling half on top of Crystal, causing her to laugh and shove him off. Stop, you sweaty monster, she laughs. Daniel's skin was indeed glistening, the sun reddening him and the light dusting of hair across his chest stuck flat to him. Barrett found him attractive, but not so much that it affected their friendship. Crystal knew this. She could tell from the first time she'd met Barrett. She could see it in his eyes. It didn't bother her. She was secure in the man she loved, even if it was young love. She felt that it could stand the test of time, and Barrett seemed to support it. So she ignored the lingering glances. She knew it was in his nature to look. She couldn't blame him. Boys, I think it's time we get in the water, she announces, tossing off her cover-up with a flutter to the ground and bound into the water, her supple ass bouncing in the fading sun. Fuck, Barrett hears Daniel mutter before he springs up and follows, picking Crystal up in the shallow water and spinning her around. She shrieks in delight and Barrett smiles, standing up with a few wobbles before joining his friends, and it's their turn to laugh and splash in the water, ignoring that they were now clearly tourists on display. Eventually they retired to the villa, stumbling, laughing raucously, and barely through the door before collapsing in their beds, the rooms spinning as they settled in for the night. The couple were both excited by the prospect of seeing the open sea, Crystal at the thought of dolphins, Daniel at the thought of swimming in those deep blue waters. Barrett was scared, if he was honest. He was scared of the idea of getting on a boat, of deep water, of the strange man, Nick. He didn't particularly enjoy new experiences, but he knew he had to try if he was ever going to get over his fear of getting out there. He just felt that this might be a step too far, too soon. As the room around him warped in and out of his mind, his vision swimming, he decided not to bring up his fears to his friends, but to do his best to enjoy an adventure for the first time in his life. The next morning they all woke groggily at the same time to the sound of pounding on the front door. Daniel struggles to it as the others watched, leaning on their door frames for support. Yeah, Daniel groans as he opens the door. The blinding morning sun made him recoil, bile in his stomach already roiling. I come to take you out, Nick answers, stepping inside as Daniel quickly shuts the door. The other two look at each other nervously. They were in no shape to take off out to the open ocean. Shit, man, yeah, sorry. Give us a few minutes. Rough night. He laughs half-heartedly. Nick smiles unsympathetically. Hurry. We must get out before the others, he urges, and with a collective sigh, the three tourists go into their room, readying themselves as quickly as they can, moaning and tripping, still half drunk. Barrett's the first out, still rubbing his bloodshot eyes as he throws a pack over his shoulder. In it he had plenty of food and water for the excursion, his smaller bag containing the items from the day before, and a novel he picked up in the airport, as well as sunscreen and a compass, just in case. He attempted small talk with Nick, but the man seemed uninterested, only responding with yes and no, until Crystal comes out, somehow looking fresh as if she'd had a full 8 hours of sober sleep. Then Nick is answering all of their questions as best he can in broken English, smiling and nodding even when it's clear he doesn't understand what's being asked or said. So, can we scuba dive? Do you have any gear? She asks just before Daniel comes out. We can swim. We can look underwater with, He makes a motion like glasses, and Crystal laughs. Okay, got it. Have you done this before? She furthers, and he nods vigorously as Daniel comes out, struggling with the straps of his nylon backpack. He had packed blankets for himself and the others. Crystal had the slightest bag, which contained a spare set of clothes for the couple. His pack rustled annoyingly as they set off down the street, doing their best to move quietly and quickly at Nick's urging. The streets are full of men, all of them heading down towards the docks, talking loudly and gruffly to each other, and Barrett feels supremely out of place. He knows he doesn't belong here, and he knows that everyone around him feels the same way. Nick, are there going to be other boats around? He asks. Nick shakes his head. No, just us. I know a place, he says as they step out onto the docks. They head all the way to the last slip where a small sailboat rocks in the gentle breeze. It's white, with a fading red pinstriping down the side. It has no name, with a small cabin that goes down into the hull of the ship and a larger bow just big enough for them to all lie down. It bumps against the docks, an empty, lonely sound here away from the others. Guys, are we sure we want to do this? Baird asks in a low voice just out of Nick's earshot. The couple nod at the same time, looking to each other and back to Barrett. They'd discussed in private how often paranoid the man was. He was always so concerned with ifs and whens that he often missed out on what was happening around him. They were convinced that they were his ticket to freedom from this suffering of his, this compulsion to have a concern over everything. Here's the cash, man, Daniel says, handing a wad of their shared money to the sailor, who pockets it with a gruff "thank you" in Greek. He sets out to untie the thing as the trio start to offload their bags on deck, flopping down to watch as the man toils in the sun, sweat dripping off his high brow. Barrett notices for the first time that Nick is attractive. The man's thin shirt is soaked in sweat, and Barrett can see his tight tan body flexing and jumping as he coils rope, tosses loops, and tidies up the deck. He bends over the back of the boat, and the distinctive plopping sound of a trolling motor hitting the water echoes. Nick pulls at the rope to start it, ripping at it, and grunts and curses under his breath until the thing coughs to life. Barrett is worried about the engine. What if it died at sea? What if it caught fire? But his friends, they were too busy staring deeply into each other's eyes and kissing with their legs dangling over the edge of the boat to notice. The boat putters out to the edge of the inlet that houses the docks on this side of the island. Then the sail is raised by a perpetually sweating Nick, the metallic sliding of hooks attached to the sail sliding up until the boat jerks sharply to the right, rocking as wind catches the sail. Nick curses. Barrett pulls out his trusty laminated translation guide, doubting that the curses would be in it, but checks nonetheless to distract himself as the water under him whooshes by. He hates watching the land grow smaller and smaller. We sail out, we drop anchor. You swim, you dive, but do not go far from the boat. Nick instructs them as the boat hurries across the water, a fast clip with the wind at its back. The couple is still paying no attention, getting handsy at the bow. Barrett turns and nods to acknowledge their host. Nick shoots him an odd look before turning back to busy himself with the motor. The boat creaks over the sound of wind rushing past their ears, but Nick doesn't seem alarmed, so the others say nothing. The sun beats down on them until a large cloud draws over it, and Nick, after looking at the sail for the umpteenth time, ducks down into the cabin. Barrett follows. It's a small, dank room with a wooden bed built into one side, a small counter with a cooktop on another, and a small door on the last wall besides the one leading up on deck. Oh, that is so much better. That sun is a killer, Barrett says. Nick grunts, digging around in a bag on the floor. Barrett stares up the stairs at the sun, watching the sail flap around in the wind. The boat rocks and he stumbles, but just before he topples to the ground, two slick, strong hands grab his shoulders. Nick looks down at him seriously. Careful, he says. His eyes glow in the dim light. He shifts past Barrett back above board. Barrett heaves a deep sigh. He hated this. All he wanted was to spend his days flopped down on his couch, reflecting on his breakup and eating veggie pot stickers, but instead, he was on a rickety boat in the middle of the sea. The boat hits a wave, rocks hard, and Barrett falls, tripping up the stairs back to his friends who now laid out on the bow, laughing and smiling up into the sun. We're almost there, Nick says gruffly from behind him, the man's breath tickling his ear. Barrett shivers as the boat begins to slow. The sail flaps noisily, gathering up onto the mast, and spray flies up into Barrett's hot face. Barrett spins around, no other boats in sight, no land in sight, nothing in sight but the glinting, rolling waves of the Mediterranean Sea. Can we swim, Nick? Crystal asks, peeking out from under the brim of her hat. Nick nods, and the couple giggle and shed their outer layers, flinging them onto the deck before slipping over the edge without a second thought. Barrett shakes his head in disbelief at their carefree nature and digs through his pockets, finding his pill bottle. Hydroxine, the label reads, and he pops 2 of them. Medication was new to him. He'd gone to see his GP a few days before the trip and was prescribed these as a general anxiety fix. He could feel them begin to bring him down after only a few moments. He laid back against the wall of the cabin, his legs tucked under him, and quickly was lulled into sleep as Nick hummed behind him, busying himself cleaning up the boat and tossing the anchor overboard. Okay, it's me. I'm out of practice. I'm going to admit I'm out of practice when it comes to reading for extended periods of time out loud. So that's number 1, something I can still work on. Some other things. I think there might be a little less for me to work on this go around. Not to say it's going to be perfect, but hopefully less. And I say that because I currently have my partner, because I'm gay, my partner. I have my partner editing my chapters after I write them. He's got a lot to say about them, but to be fair, they could just be that bad. I wouldn't know. I write them to speak them out loud, and then sometimes I go back and read them, and I'm like, what the hell? So, in this chapter, there's less repeating, which I like. I love to repeat the same word over and over and over. I like that there's 3 characters instead of what we've gotten in the past, which is really just focused on 2 characters at a time. We've got 3 main characters and 1 secondary character. So I like that. What else do I like about this chapter? I like the setup. I do. I like that it's kind of not scary, not weird. It's normal. There's nothing crazy going on. They're just going on a boat ride. It's something that I can kind of picture a lot of, I guess, normal people doing, like adventurous people being adventurous. I relate a lot more, of course, to Barrett, who wants nothing to do with being adventurous and only wants to sit at home and do nothing. But I also relate to that feeling of wanting to be more adventurous and getting out there and kind of just pushing all your anxiety and worries and nerves to the side in hopes that you'll become one of those out there people. Never happened for me, but I'm sure it happens for some people. I don't know. I would not know. But those are some things I like about this chapter. Some things that I don't really like about this chapter. I think it's long. It definitely felt long reading it. Not in a bad way. I think if you were reading it in a book, it would be fine. But I do think for a audio medium, I would call it a visual medium because technically there is a visual version of this podcast. Shout out if you're listening to this, you can watch it on YouTube. But it's primarily an audio format. I do think there is a level of fatigue, and I kind of pushed it with this chapter. It's maybe not so much because I'm just coming back, and so it's kind of refreshing, but I don't think that that's an appropriate length for a chapter. Like, oh, I have the hiccups. I'm listening to this audiobook right now. This is fantastic. It's The Ruins, the audio version, narrated by Patrick Wilson. And I think it's my Patrick Wilson from The Conjuring. If not, I'm going to pretend that it is. And the chapters just go on for forever. Like, every chapter is an hour long. I don't want to write stories like that. Like, I tried that with this chapter, I feel like, to kind of give you that big, long intro where you get to know the characters a little bit and you get to know which one's adventurous and which one's carefree and which one's just down for anything. And that's fine, but I don't want all my chapters to be like that. I want some of them to be short and some of them to be long and some of them to be in the middle, all coming together to make a book that's just right. So I think this chapter is a little long. I do. But I think it's appropriate for the idea of a first chapter. It needs to be longer so you can at least establish the relationship between your main characters. Let me look at this and see if there's anything else that I didn't like. Something that I didn't really notice, but my partner, my gay partner, did notice is I tend to focus on really weird elements of a story. Like, in this chapter, I kept focusing on how they were drinking beer, if that makes sense. Like the way that it would feel going down their throat, or the way that it would make them feel as soon as they drank it, or the way that it made their heads feel. And so I had to edit some of that out because he was right. It was a lot. I feel like there was a lot of focus on that, and I don't know why I focused on that specifically. It's like when I write things, I kind of focus on them the same way that I would focus on something in real life, and it doesn't work the same way because the real world is all encompassing, right? So you're getting everything all at once, but a story, when you're reading it, is just what you're reading. So if you dominate it with this weird specific focus or hyper focus for something, like how drinks feel when they're going down your throat, or just how drinking feels, it does tend to get a little weird. So I feel like that was something that you might not have noticed because I edited some of it out, but that you would have noticed had nobody said anything. But that's what I did like. That's what I didn't like. What else is there to tell you? I feel like I haven't talked to you in forever because I haven't. It's been like a month. I bet you thought I wasn't coming back, and I did think about it. It's been tough. I just have been feeling really discouraged lately about my creativity. Also my hairline, but mostly my creativity. Everything I feel like I try and do well creatively seems to not really lead anywhere. But that's just the way it goes, I guess, sometimes. I don't know. I am appreciative of everybody who does listen, though. I really am. I can give you a big kiss. That wasn't a very big kiss, but you get it. It is what it is. I give you something. My thanks, my gratitude for everyone who does listen and who does, not pay me attention, but who consumes my content and at least lets me know that somebody cares about it. But I decided I did need to come back, mostly because I have to keep pursuing my creative things in hopes that I get good enough at one of them to make a difference. And I guess I'm just not there yet. And I'll get there. I'm still not 10,000 hours into writing or drawing or coloring or painting or DIY. I'm not 10,000 hours into any of that. So, maybe give it another 10,000 hours and I'll be good at it. But enough rambling. I'll be back next week. I just want to thank you for sticking around and paying attention to the work that I create. Again, if you're interested, my book is in the Kindle library. You also, if you have Kindle Unlimited, which I think most people do through Prime, you can get it for free. You can also order a paperback version of it, which I have gone through so many times and edited so many times so that hopefully the finished product, if anyone ever does buy it, is good and that you don't regret buying it. So that's out on Amazon as well. Or what I would prefer, maybe what you would prefer, because Amazon is the devil, is call your local bookstore and request that they start carrying it, and then you can buy it from them instead. I guess it might be more expensive. I don't really know how that works. I know that I signed the book up for that process. So if you do call your local bookstore and tell them, hey, I want this book. It's by this author, Jonathan Lingle. It's called We Just Call It Love. You can find it on Amazon. They should be able to get copies of it and sell it to you that way. And then your small local bookshop makes a profit. Follow me on Twitter at Floor Rejects. You can find me on Twitter there. You can also find me on Etsy, where it's at Floor Rejects there too as well. You can find me where I've been sharing some of my drawings. Why am I putting an extra R in there? Drawings. Let me see if I can show you a couple if you're watching this. I draw stuff like this. Can you see? That's cool. And this one, I think I can, no, I probably can't show that one. And this one, that's cool, right? I like that one. I can show that one. That's just man boobs. I draw that. This is fascinating for everyone listening. If you are listening and you want to see them, check me out on YouTube. Not check me out on YouTube. Just Go over to YouTube and look. I'm over here. Same name, same everything. You'll find me. Trust me. But check me out on all those different places. Not check me out. Why do I keep saying that? Pursue me on all those different mediums. Etsy, and there you can buy all those prints as digital downloads. So you buy them and you get sent a download of that file. It's a high quality PDF, and you can print it out at whatever size you want, whatever paper you want, put it up in your house. Or don't use it as a wallpaper. They're pretty high quality, so you can usually use them as wallpapers on your phones or on your tablet or on your computer. Or buy my book. You don't have to, but I would love it if you did. Only if to put it on your shelf and say, that's a small queer artist I'm supporting. That's me. I'm the small queer artist. Not so small. Small in audience. Big in love. And embody. Big in love and embody. And on that note, I will bid you adieu. I will talk to you all next week. I'll be back. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. I know you all think I am because I was gone for a month, but I told you I was leaving and I'm coming back. So, next week I'll be back with chapter 2 of The Isle of Artemisia. Bye.